What's up guys, I'm Nico of CamCrunch, and today I'm going to be answering another question. If you want your question answered, be sure to go to camcrunch.com/ask, and you can leave your question there, and if I think that the question will be relevant to answer in the form of a video and in a blog post, and to share with everyone else that watches these videos and goes to the blog, then I will be doing that. So yeah, again, if you have any questions, go ahead and go to camcrunch.com/ask, and I'm going to answer your question. I'll reply either way, whether it's by email or by video, so yeah. Go do that. Today's question is about, it's a very basic general question about photography, and that is, what is the first thing you need to adjust when you take a picture? Should you adjust your aperture, ISO, or shutter speed? And is it the same in every situation, whether it's day and night and all that stuff? So I've done a video on this in the past. It's actually one of my most viewed videos, and that is that's what it talks about. It talks about aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So what is the first thing you want to change? Now, as you guys might know, the aperture, ISO, and shutter speed all change the amount of light that enters your camera. Well, the aperture and shutter do. The ISO just changes the sensitivity of your sensor in order to pick up more light or to pick up less light. So, but all of them adjust the light that your sensor captures. So, if they all adjust light that your sensor captures, which one should you change first? And is it okay to change, any of them? And it really depends on what your goals are, because the aperture, ISO, and shutter speed, although they change the amount of light that's picked up by your sensor, they all have secondary effects. And again, I talk about that in a video, which I will link down below. The aperture opens, and the aperture is the opening of your lens. So it opens and closes to let in more light. And when it opens and closes, it changes your depth of field. Now, the more open it is, the shallower your depth of field will be. So you'll get more out of focus areas. When it's smaller, you'll get more in focus. Your ISO, again, it changes the sensitivity of your chip. And the more sensitive your chip is, so the higher your ISO is, you get more of that digital grain and that digital noise in your image. So that's the side effect. And with your shutter speed, it changes the amount of light, but the slower your shutter speed is, the more motion blur there will be, and the more subject blur there will be if your subject's moving fast. So which one do you change first? Again, it depends on what your goals are. Let me give you an example. If you're doing sports photography, you want to keep your shutter speed high. So you might want to set that at something already. So you might want to keep it at like 1/1000th, 1/500th of a second, something really fast in order to freeze your subject. So you want to keep it at that. So in order to compensate for the light the light gathering of your camera, you'll want to either open up the aperture to let in more light, and if you can't do that anymore, you'll have to bump up the ISO. That's if you want to keep your shutter at a certain level. Your aperture, that's with your depth of field. So if you're taking a portrait and you want just the eyes in focus, then you'll want a certain aperture, whether it's 2.8, 1.8, something small, 1.4. So you'll have that certain f-stop. So your aperture will be, very big if you want just the eyes in focus or something like that. Because you've already kept in mind that you want the eyes to be in focus and everything else to be out of focus, and you already know what f-stop, what aperture that you're going to use, you're going to have to adjust your ISO or your shutter speed. Now, ISO is the last thing that you'll want to adjust, to raise, because it has that noise, unless you want to purposely add noise and grain into your image. But I personally think if you want to purposely add noise or grain, just do that in post, because the digital noise that you get from the sensor is usually not as good as what you can do in post. So if you purposely want to add noise, just do that in post-production. Keep your ISO low. So the last thing you want to change is your ISO. But in terms of aperture and shutter speed, if you want a certain shutter speed to freeze something, or if you want to drag something like a long exposure where you want things to run, then you know what your shutter speed should be, so you change your ISO. You change your aperture. And if it's something like a portrait where you want the eyes to be in focus and everything else to be out of focus, then you'll change your shutter speed, because you know what aperture you want. And then if you can't change either of those things, then you'll have to adjust the ISO. But the ISO, again, is the last thing you want to change, and you change your aperture and shutter speed depending on what your goals are. So I hope that answers your question, and if it did, definitely like this video, favorite the video, share the video, subscribe if you haven't yet. And again, if you want your questions answered either via email, or if it's a really big question, answered via video and a blog post, go to camcrunch.com/ask. /ask. Leave your question there, and I'll do my best to, either make a video, a blog post, or, just answer by email if it's a quick question. And yeah, I'm Nico of CamCrunch, and I'll see you guys next time.